Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Roney, and this is Dr. Bales. We're going to talk today about MS, multiple sclerosis. Well, so give you a quick insight. Multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune condition that attacks what they call the myelin of the nerve. So as Dr. Bales and I were talking about before we got on camera, Doc, you were talking about it's the wiring, right? So explain that a little bit.
So with my engineering background, I can tell you, if you have a wire that has insulation on it, that would be a normal nerve. And what they're seeing via an MRI, which is the confirmation of diagnosis, as I understand, is that insulation is eaten or missing in certain points. Not all of it.
Sure.
Anyway, that's the sclerosis part. Multiple meaning it's in multiple places.
That's right. So what happens is the sheath around the nerve is being attacked by your own immune system. So it's considered an autoimmune condition, which means your immune system has I'll use the term dysregulated. And because it has dysregulated, it's now attacking your own body. It just so happens with this particular autoimmune condition known as MS, that it attacks the myelin or the insulation around the nerve, which means your impulses don't flow as the circuit, if you will, is not it'll be in certain areas. So what I have learned over time, and Dr. Bales will talk about this in two ways. One, metabolically, what is going on, meaning at the cellular level, and what we can do internally to help that, as well as Dr. Bales has protocols with his treatments, right, that can help MS as well. So let's go and kind of uncover what happens in the human body. So the way I explain it is with any autoimmune condition, your immune system is attacking your own tissue, right? So some of the more common ones are things like Hashimoto's, where the immune system attacks the thyroid, RA, rheumatoid arthritis, where the immune system attacks the joints, etc., right? There's a lot of autoimmune conditions, MS obviously being one of them. What they don't know is why your immune system will attack one tissue versus another, right? They're not really sure of why that happens. However, they do know the mechanism. So this would be the mechanism. In my body, think about, I have this campfire, and the campfire keeps me warm, it's healthy, it's not out of control, right? Very controlled. That's a good fire to have. Conversely, if I have an inferno going on in my body, that inferno can be bad, right? So think of that as your immune system. So I either have a nice regulated immune system or I have an immune system that's kind of out of control. So I call it fire, right? Then you have to think, well, what is propelling, what is causing that fire, if you will?
Accelerating it out of control.
Exactly right. So then what we found in the research is we'll have what they call, and not to get too nerdy on you, but antigenic responders, right? What that means is things that our bodies would be exposed to that the immune system says, I don't know what that is, so it attacks, right? Those things could be foods that we eat, like your glutens, your soys, your dairies, things like that are in the literature quite heavily these days. It could be the health of your digestive system. So your digestive barrier, if you will, is 70% of your immune barrier. So if that starts to break down, we could have bad dysbiosis, which means we have too many bad versus good bacteria. We could have leaky gut or intestinal permeability, which means things are permeating into the bloodstream that shouldn't be there. That causes the immune system to say, don't know what that is, I'm going to attack that, which elevates the fire, right? We could have infections in the gut, candida, parasites, SIBO, etc. And if we have all that going on in the gut, it's going to push that fire quite high, which again, that fire fuels the Pac-Man. And the Pac-Man then can attack your myelin sheath as an MS, right? There are others too. We could have other infections like viral infections. Epstein-Barr is a big one, right? You were saying you think it's pathogenic, where it could be a pathogen. Well, viral infections, bacterial infections, parasitic infections. Nowadays, we're seeing a lot of fungal infections as well. Mold exposure, as well as candida or yeast exposure as well. We'll see heavy metals, Sometimes patients have an overload of mercury or lead or something like that, which means their immune system is going to overwork trying to respond to those heavy metals. We also see these toxins, non-metal toxins nowadays. And as an example, you're going to see in your food supply, herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, right? That's just the 3 of literally hundreds of environmental toxins that we could be exposed to these days. The point I'll make is with all of that, foods, gut health, heavy metals, non-metal toxins, infections, if some or all of those are in your system, your immune system is going to be working overtime to try to combat those, which then causes a dysregulation. Well, before that, it causes inflammatory cytokines, too much inflammation, and that inflammation will then cause a dysregulated immune system to where your immune system now doesn't know good from bad or bad from good. So it starts to attack even the good cells because it gets confused. So the fuel to the fire is what creates that. In MS, the Pac-Man just happens to be fueled by these fuels, right? And it attacks the myelin sheath of the nerve.
Right.
So if we wanted to put an autoimmune condition, any of them, in remission, it's not necessarily so much worried about the tissue being attacked. It's the mechanism that I just explained. So we have to pour water on the fire. And how do we do that? We can do that with things like vitamin D, very, very important to immune regulation. I'll typically recommend between 5 and 10,000 IUs of vitamin D. I'll recommend glutathione. It's one of the body's most powerful antioxidants and anti-inflammatories. So I'll recommend typically about 500 milligrams of that. I'll recommend curcumin or turmeric, about 1,500 milligrams of that. I'll recommend resveratrol, which is combined with turmeric, very good to bring the cytokines or the inflammatory proteins down. I'll recommend omega-3s, and there are others, but that's a good base to pour water on the fire. And then what I'll do with my patients, I'll start testing them for everything from food sensitivities, their gut health, infections, heavy metals, non-metal toxins, etc. In addition, though, I want to know if they're having blood sugar issues. I want to know if they're having adrenal and hormone imbalances, etc. Because those also could create inflammation or fuel to the fire. So at the end of the day, at a metabolic level, we want to make sure we reduce the fire, but we get rid of all the fuels. And that's just going through when we evaluate a patient, finding out with a checklist, working them through that checklist. So I always say this even to my chronic patients, whether it's autoimmune cancer, I have this checklist and all I want to do is say, yes, no, 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 yes, no, yes. Whatever comes up, yes, we start working on clearing them out. If we can do that, we lower the fuel to the fire and then we lower the fire. And now the immune system, the Pac-Man, can just work the way it's supposed to work. It just goes around and identifying bad things and it attacks those, instead of identifying the good things as bad because it's so stimulated, if that makes sense. Hopefully that made some sense metabolically with an autoimmune condition in general, but specifically MS. And then Dr. Bales, sometimes we'll team up with an MS patient and he'll do some of his treatments on the MS patient to help them as we're working through the metabolic dysfunction. But go ahead, Doc.
I just have to say, if Dr. Roney was a mechanic, you'd be the most thorough mechanic.
Oh, yeah. I like processes. I like systems for sure. Formulas. I like formulas.
Yeah. So while all that is going on, what we can do, not just for MS, but for a host of other diseases, is use the Firefly light therapy device, which my dad and I did create as an energy medicine device. So it puts out different wavelengths or different colors of light.
Okay.
And preceding that, I'll take what's called an F scan, and we've talked about this before, but F stands for frequency. It's new technology out of Switzerland. And what that does in about 2 minutes is detect all of the co-infections. Oh. So we know that the multiple sclerosis is going on. We know other chronic diseases too. They're going,
Sure.
well, that leaves the body open during that time to get a lot of what we call opportunistic infections, or they become co-infections. So things
Sure.
that a patient's body, that we're exposed to every day,
Yeah.
wouldn't normally take root,
Right.
able to take root because the body is so inflamed and the immune system is so taxed, and just, it's like the small dog that just goes after everything.
Yeah, sure,
You know,
sure. Which is, so you're looking for some of those fuels to the fire.
Absolutely,
Is that fair to say?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, on the pathogen point, the F-scan unfortunately doesn't do the metals. That
That's
would be
okay.
that would be really
Yeah.
cool, but we can cover that with Dr. Roney.
Yeah, sure, sure.
So we're from the pathogen being parasite, bacteria, and virus, and all of those opportunistic co-infections. I've never seen a chronic disease patient not have any of those.
Yeah, agreed.
And usually quite a bit more.
To that point, it's usually multifactorial. It may not have started that way, right? Maybe something triggered this immune system to dysregulate, right? It could have been one thing, but as the immune system gets more and more taxed, if you will, then more things appear.
Right.
So it may start out like this, and then all of a sudden there's 5 things going on now that are contributing, which is why patients tend to worsen over time.
Yeah, and then it becomes chronic, and then it gets in this negative vicious cycle.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly right.
So we can take an F-scan, like I said, it just takes 2 minutes, figure out what the co-infections or the opportunistic pathogens are,
Mhm.
and then choose which one we want to battle.
Yeah.
And we're actually able to, the F-scan gives a frequency associated with the pathogen, says it by name, which I really like, so we know what we're dealing with,
Yeah,
and gives a frequency called a resonant frequency. Resonance, the process of resonance is the lady singing breaking the glass.
Right.
So she's not hitting the glass. So using the light and programming the light with this frequency that we get from the F-scan, there's one more step. My father's electronics take that one frequency and actually make what's called sidebands, thousands of side frequencies. And researchers in the late 30s actually found out that it wasn't one frequency that killed something, it was using all of these sidebands. For the musicians out there, on a piano, there's middle C, and then there's another C. I'm not a musician, but I do know.
Sure,
So
sure.
if you can think of it like that, think of it, sidebands also as octaves, I guess you
octaves,
would.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And to that, Doc, say it's a parasite or a virus or whatever, what have you.
Right.
Each of those have their own frequency. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So what you're doing is trying to match that. What your machine does can match that frequency. So it basically can.
It resonates.
destroy.
Yeah, think of a very small glass,
Yeah.
and we're instead of singing, we're using passing the light through and basically shaking till they blow up.
So they
And the
blow up.
benefit of that, and I get patients ask time is, will this hurt my good cells and good bacteria? Well, no, we're not using those frequencies.
That's right.
So it's frequency specific light therapy.
Yeah, and this is proven by a ton of research.
Yeah.
Just going back, I know I've done my homework on these since I've learned more about Dr. Bales, but this goes back many years.
Yeah.
Many years.
Late 1930s.
Yeah. So there's a ton, and again, it's one of those things where there are multiple ways. What's the saying? There's many ways to skin the cat.
Yeah.
So we can use certain supplements. We can use certain things to also help, or even medications if the person needs it. But sometimes the easy way is just to match the frequency and kill these things, right?
Kill the bugs.
Because it can happen a lot quicker. That's the other part. So again, it's using these resources that we have to be able to knock some of these infections out of the body, so that the body doesn't have as much fuel to the fire, and that autoimmune condition. In the literature, we're never able to say it can be cured, right? But what I do tell patients is we can put an autoimmune condition into total remission as if you don't even have it, by getting rid of all those fuels to the fire and knocking down the fire. And that's proven. That's not anything that I'm making up. We see it every day.
Absolutely. We definitely have enough resources right here in the center.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah, there's many ways to skin the cat.
Exactly.
But I do know that the frequency, everything's energy. That's what I've learned, right? Whether it's a parasite, a bacteria, a virus especially, they have a frequency. They have an energy.
Right.
And as long as we're matching that and creating that like you said, that vibration, is that what it is?
Yeah,
It
exactly.
could explode. So anyway, I didn't want to.
Oh, no,
I didn't want
no
to steal your
worries.
thunder, but I was
No
giving
worries.
you. I was like, stuff works. Stuff works.
So typically in 3 treatments, the treatments are 10 minutes, and we're treating usually over the abdomen for the 10 minutes because, like you said, that's where 70%. A few times we'll treat lungs and in that area too. We're able to destroy these pathogens and then allow the immune system to fight what it really needs to fight instead of being so preoccupied with all this other.
Correct. And then you were talking about some stats. Did you have?
I did. I actually looked it up, and I always wondered because I see dementia, other neurocog deficiencies, maybe not autoimmune, but other neurocog, Parkinson's and that. And one thing I noticed with the multiple sclerosis patients, they were young.
Yeah.
And sure enough, the average age is 34.
34. And do you, from my research, it was female dominant. Is that accurate?
Twice, 2 to 1.
2 to 1.
2 to 1 for female dominant. Again, I don't know why it's actually like that for another SLE or lupus.
Right.
Is another good example of autoimmune that's similar to female dominant.
From my homework, I believe I read 60-70% of all autoimmune conditions are female.
Huh.
And again, that changes, but I'm pretty sure somewhere in that range. So it's a female dominant. Autoimmunity is female dominant. Not 100% sure why. I have some theories, but we'll leave that for another day. But anyway.
So there's that, and it's between 500 and 1 million people in the U.S. alone. And the reason 500,000, and that's quite a variance.
Yeah.
And the reason is they were using data from the 1970s before MRIs were available.
Gotcha.
And so when they started MRI, the more you image, the more you find.
That's right.
And so it's probably more. Those are probably low in number. The good news is, and this is just using the Firefly, but I'm sure if you did everything Dr. Roney to the success rate would even skyrocket more, was that within a couple of these treatments, and I mentioned the gut, but we also treated some over the limbs, or kind of the worst symptom, the extremity was there. People were markedly better. People were out of their walkers. People were, I'm not going to say they were running a marathon, but in these treatments, maybe 10 more minutes on the extremities.
Yeah.
So combined, our therapies and Dr. Roney's investigation internal.
Well, I always say the checklist is long, but it doesn't mean you have all of those.
No.
But at least it gives us. I formulated a priority list, and that may change based on what the patient tells me too. So some of their symptoms guide me as well as to what I want to address first, for sure. But I'm a big fan. Lower the inflammation. Let's start looking at gut. Let's start looking at liver and infections. And then if we can start to get rid of some of those, what's going to happen is, to your point, where hypothetically, say Dr. Bales is working with an MS patient and he's working on their infections. Well, if their MS is highly driven by those infections, he's going to see massive changes fairly quickly. However, say he's working on their infections, because I get asked this a lot, that's why I'm bringing it up. Say he's working on their infections and they improve somewhat, but not entirely. Well, all that means is there's other fueling the fire.
Yeah.
That's all it means. It's actually, some of this detective work and deductive reasoning, where we go, okay, you've got better, maybe you're 30% better after working with, say, Dr. Bales. Now, again, some people will go 90% better if the majority of the fuel to the fire is infectious-based, right? Yep. But if, say, they get somewhat better and they report that, but they're saying, I'm still having these symptoms, we just know that there's other fuels.
It's there.
So we just look at other areas. It's really, so no matter what, we're one step closer to healing.
And what I call it is the plateau, the healing plateau. If I can get them to 30%, that's great. I don't need to pat myself on the back, but definitely get it over for Dr. Roney. So again, with the younger age of diagnosis, average age of 34, the success rate has been higher than with other, just because, and again, this is for all chronic disease if you can catch it early.
Yeah, for sure.
But with the lower age versus an average age of Parkinson's that I think is more in the 50s or something, and then dementia is more in the 60s, and then it's just younger people have a better capacity to heal if utilized. And again, we never say the 4-letter word cure, but if we can keep it in remission for the rest of the patient's life and they can live a healthy life, I'm happy. I think they're happy too.
No question. And again, it comes back to, if they have changed the cellular environment, like I said, they're working on their gut consistently, they're not putting bad foods in, their liver's detoxing. If their barrier systems are strong and we get rid of the infections, and then their barrier systems are addressed and they're nice and strong, gut barrier being one of those, they have a better chance of not getting these fuels to the fire to reoccur, which then causes the Pac-Man to attack again. So it's a lifelong, quite frankly, a lifelong process of just maintaining some of these areas so the Pac-Man doesn't get that fuel. So it's remission, and then it's just making sure we're maintaining these areas to keep the fuels down in the body.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So hopefully that was helpful. There's tools in the toolbox. There's definitely resources, and Dr. Bales' protocols help a ton as one of those fuels or one of those tools in the toolbox. And sometimes it's a lot of it. Like that's the thing. Like sometimes it's like, because we always, people would ask, well, why would this help somebody 30% and some others 90%? Right? Yeah. It has to do with the other fuels.
Exactly.
That's all. That's really
we can find them out pretty fast.
That's exactly
so
right.
So it's not hard. Good thorough investigation. I wanted to make one announcement, and I had planned this pre-COVID, but it didn't happen. We're going to have a free multiple sclerosis weekend. Here at the center. Patients can come in and receive 2 treatments, one on Saturday and one on Sunday. And it's free. They just have to sign consent forms, and they agree to be filmed, because like I mentioned, when I've treated multiple sclerosis patients before, they were getting up out of the walker, okay, or with a wheelchair, or they're getting off the walker, and I wanted just to show that, because when I tell some other people, they don't believe me, and I want to show them their own thing. So if you could send your name in, we're not setting any dates right now.
Sure.
But if you just send your name in so you're on the list, or call in and just put your name on the list, and hopefully we'll get it going soon.
Yeah, sounds great. Okay, gang, any questions, any concerns, definitely forward them to us, Dr. Roney or Dr. Bales, or the clinic in general, and we'll get back to you, help you in any way we can. Okay? Have a great day. Hope you learned a little bit.
Thank you. Bye.